Please, please, please do not try to go into the world and expect it to match, you know, stuff that you've drawn on a paper as a diagram. I'll talk about that. That really doesn't work. If you don't do any of the other stuff that we've done, and you simply learn a system or a diagram or something on paper, which is the kind of stuff we're doing most of the time when we're learning other things, because we just want knowledge. If you don't have any of the other perceptual development going on, and you don't draw and you don't practice, I think you can get a big headache actually learning perspective theory. And then the second you step into the world and try to apply it, you'll probably make yourself nuts. I will elaborate. But in high school or some point in the past, we may have something like this that we've done. Okay, the common, super common, standard thing is, hey, kids, first draw, maybe we got rulers and stuff, which I, do not recommend you use at any point in this process. Draw a line, right? And just like when we're a kid and we draw a line across our paper we've turned horizontally, we may decide that that's what is that? I just drew a line. It's a horizon, right? That's a horizon line. This is great. All I've got to do is draw a line, and that means this is the sky and this is land, or something like that. Okay. Next thing you know, the teacher is telling you, hey, put a little dot right there, and you're doing stuff like this. Now, nothing that's in this diagram is wrong. I'm not saying that. Not saying that at all. And it could be handy for explaining certain things. But how often are we in a situation where we actually can see a distinction between land and sky described, like a line? Now, it can be done. I can go here, and with a few exceptions, a few interruptions in Nevada or Utah or wherever the heck I've gone, yeah, I kind of got a line out there. I can kind of see it, right? If I was out on a boat on the ocean, I'd probably see a nice line, a sky, and then see and say, yeah, I see the horizon line. But I don't know about you. I don't live here. People do, but perspective's everywhere, absolutely everywhere, all the time, because perspective, the term, is referring to, it's referring to things receding into space. It's the effects of, distance on how things look, right? So, uh, this explains why if I am in a situation like that, something that is really big, like a mountain, I can see it though, you know, it doesn't look that big. People like to do those goofy things, like put their hand, you know what I mean? Like they're holding their hand, like, look, I'm holding the mountain, they take those photographs that they can play with perspective and so forth. But very seldom is it the way that we're taught by drawing this line on our paper. But this is the next thing we'll do is we'll start drawing something like railroad tracks, right? And what it's about is it's about the most ideal way to talk about the simplest concepts of perspective, because you got to get all this other stuff out of the way so you can sort of like, show these kinds of, it's like doing 1, 2, 3, and 4 and A, B, C, and D, and 2 plus 2 and that kind of stuff before you get complicated, I suppose, because, the truth is the world's full of stuff and everything is going on. But it's actually quite hard to find situations where you get one point perspective, right? So this is one point perspective, it's called. And so if here I am, I'm disillusioned and my line is still there. I'm disillusioned and I'm walking on these railroad tracks. By the way, if anybody recognized what the film this is from, I'll give you a half dozen stickers. But I could walk on the railroad tracks, which I did do. I grew up by railroad tracks, played on railroad tracks, but it was not a flat desert-like terrain around. It was hilly and messy and stuff like that. And things were interrupting the landscape. So if you stand on these, in the middle of these, you can get this nice, tidy little example, because he's in the way right now, right? But parallel lines, will converge. Now we know, this is cool, I get to draw on top of an image with Harry Dean Stanton. Now we know if we're directly overhead, and my drawing will be crude, but you know exactly what I mean, that the tracks have been laid, the rails are the same distance, and of course this is like the Pittsburgh Public Works kind of job here that I've done. I've got my spacing really bad. Pittsburgh Water Authority will do work like that. I should not accept it, but these rails aren't angled, literally. They look like they are from my perspective, from where I stand, okay? And these ties are not getting closer together. They are spaced evenly for miles and miles. Boy, that's, whoo. Here it is. This is a crappy old railroad tie. For miles and miles and miles, these are, they're measuring the same distance between the ties, and they're laying these rails perfectly parallel. they're not getting, closer together, farther apart, anything like that. They can't, there's a train that has to sit on those, and, it's got to be right. And if I am immediately overhead, it will look like that. But from this angle, I have one of those situations where I can see that the effect of perspective is that it looks like this and this would converge. Most things aren't that long. Even big buildings, they don't go on as long as he is in a situation, Harry Dean, where he can turn around. He's got his little water jug. That's all he needs. Just keep on walking. He can turn around and look back. And how far are we looking? Incidentally, right here, we're not standing in the exact same place that Harry is. Harry's in the middle between the tracks. We are probably standing on this rail, more or less. Can you agree? More on that in a minute. But how far is that back there where these two parallel things would converge? Is it a mile? It might be two. I don't know. It's far away. And most things don't go that far running parallel, so we can see this kind of stuff, which is why in most diagrams we have dotted lines or broken lines or whatever that say that this and this would converge, right? So I know that this is an angle that makes it look crazy, okay? That same box, this will be a little funky, but you'll get the idea. I could probably, well, maybe it's a little more rectangular than that. But who knows? Maybe there's an angle I could set it at, and that same box, is looking something like this. Boy, I draw better with my pencil. Maybe I should use that snap thing that I use sometimes. But, maybe this is only 24 inches and that's it. But if these two sides were to continue, eventually they would converge. And that's kind of the effects of perspective in a nutshell. But it gets a lot more complicated because not everything is a geometric object and not everything is so neat and tidy. When you're working with boxes, it's neat and tidy. When you're out in the desert, it's neat and tidy. When you step outside of your door in Pittsburgh, it ain't neat and tidy. Would you agree? Maybe some thumbs up emojis would tell me that if I am drawing this on my paper, because we're out in the desert, what do you call that where those lines would converge, supposedly? We call that a vanishing point, okay? But vanishing points don't really exist. They do in a sense in which you could say the point in which, like, well, yeah, if I'm on a roadway out in the middle of Montana and I can see 2 miles and it looks like it comes to a point on the horizon, that's the vanishing point. But there's not literally a little dot out there. Don't go out looking for a vanishing point in a landscape like this. You see what I'm getting at? I can't even, I know there's some things. Well, let's try one. I suppose, let me get the thing here so it's clean. I suppose that, no, in Pittsburgh, they don't even make the telephone poles or the whatever power. Those might not even be the same height. the ground is too differing in level. Let's see. Now, of course, I know that something like this little house here, I know that this side right there has to be a tiny bit taller than this side right there because it's a little closer to me, but it's way off, who knows where, that and that would converge. Not the best thing to pick. It's tough. I might even pick windows, or something like this. Something that lines up, that window sills that I know were hung at the exact same height, or something like this. But this, I would say, we are much more likely to come across in our daily life here in Western PA than we are this. Okay, so listen carefully, right? This is important. I don't really like to call it the horizon line. That's the common thing, but let's call it something else. Let's call this, make a note of this, write it down. If you stayed up last night because of masochism, or you just couldn't, you were nauseated and you just couldn't, I understand. I try to do a shot of a cortadito or a cafe con leche or something. Let's call this eye level. Instead of horizon line, let's say eye level. Okay, because we know that we're not going to see a horizon line most of the time, unless we're out on a boat or unless we're in the desert or something like that. But we always have our eye level. You know what this is? Take your pencil and hold it right here. It's that. It's about the relationship of something that is horizontal to your eyes, right? Something could be here, something could be a little below it, something could be way above it, right? There is also this. Which is a vertical sort of thing between your eyes, right? So think about that as this. That's there. It's not literally there. You don't have that in front of your, you're not a robot that has like, but things can always be in relation to your eye level and this vertical part of the axis that is there too, which is why I know that I am standing here, because more or less I might be a smidgen off or whatever, or there might be a little bit of roughness in this terrain, just a little, but this looks more or less straight, this railroad tie. And if I step over to here, it'll get angled, but it'll be angled a different direction. And we'll see that in the other slide in the desert. This actually you can kind of count on. You can kind of count on the axes. See, below my eye level and a little to the right. And as I sort of pull and draw these kinds of thingies, it'll make sense that, yeah, if I stepped a little bit more to the right side, I might get less angle on that railroad tie, and I might start to get some angle on, you know. Imagine that there's a thicker plus sign, and that this is all filled in with the obvious, stuff, because that happens, okay? If things are level, if things are, these two railroad ties fit with it nicely because, they're man-made things that are straight and parallel and so forth. It gets much harder when you start looking at things that, aren't. See how there's one angle here and there's one angle there? It ain't the same angle. That's explained easily, and disregard that line I got on there from before, but that's explained easily by my vertical orientation in relative to those things, okay? So we got this stuff, and it's about things getting smaller as you go back in space, and lines converge. What the heck do you do with something like this? I feel like if you worked on things like this all day, and then we went outside and I was like, now draw this, that I just don't think you would be I don't think you'd be doing this, I think you'd be better served, now there's some things I will point out in this lecture that would be very helpful to you in drawing this, but without other stuff to help you observe all this, the cars and the crookedness, and the tilt and all that. So you run back on the campus, right? Maybe I should go do some undo. We run back on campus because we got scared to death. Good Lord, it's nuts out there. I need some structure. I need some architecture. I need some right angles if I'm going to do a perspective drawing. I can't go to Troy Hill or wherever and just look at that. That's insane, I'm moving to Phoenix, or somewhere where at least the ground isn't doing all kinds of stuff. But you're back on campus and you're in Doherty Hall, say, and it's really normal for us to, probably the most common thing in the world. You're learning one-point perspective. One-point perspective is where lines converge to one point. Imagine that. So into the hallway you go, and the teacher has told you, hey, this is a building, ceiling's not very high, you don't have to worry about anything getting crazy way up in the sky. I'll talk about that later. You can look at the side of your paper, the side of your 18 by 24. That'll help you keep, just refer to that so you don't get your verticals too crooked. You're in luck. Your verticals will stay vertical. Just check relative to the edge of your paper and don't make them, don't draw your verticals like this. They're not the ones that are getting affected by this stuff. It's the horizontals, okay? And you sit yourself right down in the center of the hallway. You don't even move yourself more towards this wall or that wall. You put yourself in the center, okay? And you look up, and there's architectural information, structural information like this. and you say, okay, like the railroad tracks, dun, 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 dun. Wait a minute. Somewhere it starts going the other way. I think these are two different angles. This must be somewhere in there. Somewhere thereabouts, somewhere pretty close to that, must be my this, right? So again, don't go looking in a hallway like this for a dot off in the distance somewhere. Don't even look for a place where you can actually see something come to a triangular point because it's converging, because it won't. Now we can imagine this and this converging at a point, just like the railroad tracks. But this is not that deep a space, right? So we just have to imagine it. Like maybe we'll have some of those lighter lines or dotted lines in there. Sure. But okay, let's try that trick again, because we got horizontal lines over here. Dun, dun. These are all going like, I can see it, Mullins. I see the axes. I see, because there are concrete blocks in the walls, they reflect the axes. And I know if I was standing perpendicular to them, they would just be horizontal lines, nice and straight and even. I know the spacing doesn't really change. It's the effect of perspective. But somewhere through here, I'm either going to see one of them start to look like a straight line, or it's going to change direction. And I'm looking right here because it looks like, dun, 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 dun. Wait a minute. Are these two different angles? They go in two different ways? They might be. You know, so often in real space class, I'll have a Sharpie and I'll have things like this, and I'll, hey, come on up here and draw on this picture with a Sharpie and show me where, you know. And so the student draws some axis lines, and then we look at it and we say, well, how'd they do? Now here I would say pretty close. But see right there, I may have gotten it just a tad too high, because see that, how I'm covering up that little thing right there? So this one right here is not going to land right in the middle, and this one right here is not going to land in the middle. It's landing right about there. So this, I might want to bump this down just a tad. Can everybody see that? I hope you can see that. Let me see if I can do it again. Because what I'm trying to do is I want this and this to basically continue and get to here at a place that makes sense. Okay, so if you look close, you might see how splitting closer down the middle, how this looks a little better. And I am splitting hairs, but that's kind of the nature of this stuff. See that? So now we're really reflecting the axis. We got something good here. We're in the center of a hallway. I can go to my VP, which again, I don't never look for a vanishing point. You'll never find a vanishing point. But you can look for this relative to yourself. Where is that? Where are my eyes? And that will explain the relationship to stuff, you know. So now when I play this little game based upon what I've established, things are going to come out not too bad, right? And let's pick a row of cinder block here. See that? I always get a little funky in here, but you can imagine those are all nice and cleanly coming together. And, well, did they hang the bulletin board level? Let's see. Yeah, not too bad. How about these lights? How about the top of the lights? Again, my funk ends up being in here because I don't click perfectly on the exact right spot. But you know, you got this kind of business, all of it fitting into this. See that? Pick one of these. This should make sense. Very neat, very tidy. When we do these kinds of drawings in the hallway, the students often will draw the hallway a lot like this, even if it's not even really their situation. What am I talking about? Well, I'll come along and I'll point out that, hey, you're kind of leaning against this bright wall, and it's a long way down the hall, but you've drawn it like it's farther away from you, and you've drawn it like you're in your center. And that's the kind of thing we do to make it more comfortable. You know, like the actual angle that they've got on their right wall might be really tight and crazy because they're closer to it and not very wide at all. So I'm pointing out on their paper, it's like, well, maybe your right side needs to look like this, you know, and it's only that wide. And then on your other side, we can see like more of the hallway, and it's got to go like that. And, you know, we just tend to make stuff look more, you know, symmetrical and parallel. Everybody imagine that you move to the right or you move to the left. Imagine that we see less of these doors, and we see more of the bulletin board, and it has a different angle, you know, that kind of stuff. Or imagine that somebody is sitting like 10 feet farther back down the hall, but they've drawn it just like this, you know. So instead of dealing with the stuff that's between this point and them, they have just sort of cropped it in this way and made it more comfortable. That's incredibly common. So they'll get a drawing, it's like, this all looks good and it all looks correct, but it's actually not the exact, you know, position that you were in. And they'll be like, oh, okay. I said, well, don't worry. First thing is get something that doesn't look awkward and is working. And then you can start challenging yourself a little bit more with, you know, going into a stairwell or trying to get something that has some really crazy tight angles or whatever. You know, so you do something like that, and you, oh, easy peasy. But then you go to a different floor in the same building, and the floor is doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Are you familiar with this hallway? You can't help but notice it and think about this kind of stuff because it confounds perspective. Once when I was worked at a sign shop, I was a sign guy when I was young, and I'd get somebody who had a shop and it was on a funky street. The street wasn't level. You know, there'd be some lower windowsill that they had wasn't level. And before I'd put the lettering in the window, I'd say, hey, I don't want to do this, and then have you tell me it looks wrong, because we got to figure something out here. Do you want this to look right relative to the other architecture that's here that is actually crooked? Or do you want it purely level? Because I can put this level up on your window and we can hang it level, but then it might look funny because then the street's doing this, if you know, in front of it. So I think about things like that when I go, you know, because people have hung stuff in this floor in Doherty and had to, you know, they had to make their choice, right? So you're drawing this. Here's a window. Here's some stripes on the paint job, right? I mean, look at that. Look at this, then look at that. You know, I mean, it's like just, and it's because the floor is going to the crazy stuff. The floor is not, you know. I might point out while we're looking at this, things like this. Light fixtures, all the same size. They're not getting smaller. They're not getting closer together. That's the effective perspective. Each one of them you have to draw like, okay, I got to get this one a little smaller, and this one a little small, and then I got to get the spacing a little tighter each time. It's one thing to do that with the railroad ties. It's another thing to do it with a bunch of light fixtures that involve ellipses. Ellipses being the effects of, this will be really awful. Yeah, I can't even do it with the, but you know, an ovoid kind of loop of some kind rather than, you know, something square or whatever. So if we were to, even though we're in the center and we could use these tiles, which are helping us out, the difference, like the windows and these bricks and stuff, it's just never gonna, you know, you're going to get a drawing that looks like it's got something messed up because that's the nature of that. That's the nature of that uh, situation on that floor. Is that you know, you've got a case of conflicting and funky perspective information. Life is like that. All right, so you're in the lab. How do I know? How do I know that either I'm quite short as a viewer in this situation or I'm sitting down? How do I know? Well, looking at this, and this is totally one of those examples I was talking about the hallway. Like over here, there's probably some stuff that I could make look like this if I just moved myself. But from where I'm at, I don't see hardly anything, and this width is very little. And then over here, I get this big, wide sort of spread. The old, you see what I'm saying? Like this, about how this is just only that wide. You know, that's very real. This molding right here, that's some angle right there. Now over here, we get to see plenty. See how tight all that is over there? All right, well, I'm out of sorts. Let's go to some of the stuff that might help me figure this out. Because yeah, more like life, even though this is an organized, clean and tidy lab, there's things in the way. But if they've, you know, hung the cabinets level, I can count on that. And this is what you should do when you're doing a drawing. You should not try to draw this cabinet and then draw this cabinet and then draw that cabinet and hope that it comes out right. You should draw a nice light structural line like we did on day 3 or whatever that was, because that's how you're going to get it right. Well, I'm supposed to be able to rely on my verticals. There's a piece of vertical information. Imagine that is a light structural line that I'm putting in place on my drawing paper, helping me get my bearings, you know. But when I go along this counter that I cannot see on top of, I see stuff that's on top of the counter, but I can't see onto the counter. I can see up underneath this here tells me something. Here's where an angle starts to go in another direction. This looks like, you know, I'm practically straight across. Maybe that's because my eye level. There are things, it's like that. Please have fun at some point today in your kitchen. You will find, now, kitchen counters aren't that high. We vary greatly in height, but kitchen counters are 30 some inches off the ground usually. And if you're just standing, you're going to be able to see onto them. But if you gradually squat down, you'll find that there's a place where it becomes a straight line. And if you keep squatting, it'll be a place you can see underneath the cabinet or under the lip of the cabinet, right? And then you know something has happened, right? The angle has turned, it's going a different direction. Now, nobody has any problem with stuff like what I just did right here. Everybody can see that stuff. That's easy right there. Zing. Like I said, this over here, something that tight, because I'm standing over here. I'm not standing closer to these cabinets. I'm standing over here somewhere, right? So all of this creates a sitch. Try to extend these. This might get a little funky, but you'll get the idea. I hope it doesn't get too funky. You know, I'm probably, you know, standing in a place where somewhere through here is my center, you know, my vertical center and my eye level, because that's what these angles are telling me, because that's the relationship of these things too. So as a result, a wall that may be 5 feet, 4 feet, I don't know what the heck this cabinet or this thingy is over here, it looks like a centimeter. It looks that tight, that scrunched. In my neighborhood, I can go for walks and I can look down the street, and the row houses, if I'm at the right angle, can look like that. It can be like house, 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 all scrunched together with crazy angle, you know, of their tops and bottoms. And I'd encourage you, if you can deal with stuff like that, it's generally, uh, you know, but like I said, I've had people in situations like this where they're doing a fine job, but they're drawing kind of back to something they can deal with. So what I'll get will be based more on this idea, if you know what I mean. Which is, and I'll come along and say, okay, good, but that's not really where you are. You know, there's not really equal viewing of both sides of things, and this is like over to the left, and you know what I mean. And we gotta talk about that. Okay, so know that even if you're getting things kind of generally correct, we tend to be a little reticent and shy about that kind of stuff. You've been in these positions. Maybe you've been seated in the center and you get a nice kind of even one. But if you're got a window seat to the right, which looks like I do, right? You know, got lots of, you know, my vertical thing is going to end up somewhere over here, right? Somewhere in there. Not as easy to like grab something immediately because these things aren't perfectly square or whatever, but we can use this information and we can figure out that, like, you know what, yeah, maybe somewhere through there, and you know, so you get a lot more of this whoosh, whoosh over here, and it's tight on the right because I'm seated, you know, hereabouts, right? And of course these things that would be round circles were looking directly down at them or up at them are ellipses, and the spacing of them gets tighter as they get smaller. There's a lot to do. We have a tendency to do these kind of drawings where we'll get like this major obvious angle thing, like where the wall meets the ceiling and where the floor meets the wall. We'll get that angle, work all that out. But then all this other stuff like these seats will just start kind of going do and putting it in every which way. And I would recommend that you still, you know, even that you need to lightly and loosely establish some lines, because these things are the same and they're lined up, you know, and they've been put in rows and all that, and that you need to make these kind of lines all the way across your page lightly and loosely in order to draw this and not have it be funky, right? So perspective drawing, architectural renderings are a lot like that stuff on in the beginning, day 3 or whatever that was, you know, in which we did structural lines it's time to return to that and work that way when we're working out angles, right? So you'll have times in which you go into situations and it's not cluttered. There aren't other people around. There's not like a lot of carts, every one of them turned and tilted their own direction with their own vanishing points and their own stuff going on. There'll be times like this where you feel like you can just sort of see it, nice and neat and tidy. You know, an exemplar of 1-point perspective. Maybe you're in a hotel or you're on a balcony and you look out the window, you know, and oh, I can see the cars and I can see this and all these things. But with ledges and how windows line up, and they do, whatever you do, don't try to draw a window at a time. That's the number one thing. I hope you hear me. You know, you gotta establish, you know, some of this stuff, get it correct, work out the relationship to, you know, the top of the building, the line of the sky. Because if you try to draw a window and then you just go and try to draw the next window, it'll look really awkward. You know, but I can figure out from this that something like that is my deal, you know. You know, from my place, maybe that needs to go a little to the right, perhaps, I don't know, but you get the idea. But, you know, it's often not so simple. So have fondness and nostalgia for the good old days where you lived in Australia and you could always see these nice horizon lines when you were on the road. And your biggest problem was the outlaw bikers that were trying to kill you. But when you had to draw, you know, perspective, there wasn't too much messing it up for you. Maybe you had a couple of things that weren't doing the exact same business. For example, this sign, this end is closer to me, the viewer. So I know this end is going to get bigger. Somewhere down the way, these lines would converge. Okay. Even if the sign is actually the same height over here as it is here, you know, the viewer is in such a position that it looks like this. Simple perspective stuff. But I can't put the exact same vanishing points and all that kind of stuff on the car. Here's one of those nice, neat desert road in Australia. Look at that. Comes to a point. Fits the diagram. But what about the car? Oh my gosh, it's not even square. It's got curves and it's got, oh my gosh. But it is still true that the rear of the car here is the part that is closer to me. So it is true, even though the car has curvature and is not a perfect box, it must get compressed towards this end from where I stand. The back must be a little bigger than the front. This tire must be ever so slightly smaller than this one. Right? This is where this stuff starts getting tough. And this is where I would say that your ability to simply observe shapes, a la all our other teachings, it would be very good if that came into play to help you here, because to try to work this out with perspective theory alone would be kind of a pain in the butt, right? Because as I said, it's not just boxes and squares and rectangles that we have in the diagrams all the time. And, you know, streets aren't even level, right? So I might need a different, if all of these things are level, and of course, when houses are 120 years old and there's been a lot of settling, uh, there may be no right angles left. But to draw this, light lines, lots of them, figuring out these relationships, you know. See, I can't rely on one line for these poles because the street is an uphill, you know, it does an uphill kind of curve thing. So that's out. But if I'm going to get these windows right, I'm going to need some lines like so, right? I can't just draw a window, draw a window, draw a window, and hope that they look right. They won't. If you're really good, maybe you could pull that off, but I doubt it. You know, you need to do this kind of stuff, okay? If you're going to get these windows and doors, things like these steps, you know. And this isn't even that cluttered a landscape, but it happens. You get parked cars, get a fire hydrant, maybe someone's got a trash bin out here, you know, whatever else might happen. All that occurs. And so never stop doing your structural lines and you draw the same way. It's very common for us to do lines where tops of buildings meet the sky and then something that's for when the buildings hit the street. But then say to hell with it and start, you know, and perspective affects everything. Everything. It's everywhere. Everything is three-dimensional in space, going back in space. So, weird things that we do, like these trees, which I recommend you see as one big overall shape. A shrub is a lot easier to do that to, rather than the spindly, you know, leaves off winter trees. But yeah, can you see it? I want to get you where you're looking at something like that and you see those axis lines, like you just automatically see them. Because at first, just like we have an idea of what a face looks like or something, we think about a building as a symmetrical. We think about it that way. We think about it the way it's drawn in a blueprint. We know there's 3 windows and they're the same size and they line up. We have to switch that to where when we look, we see these axes lines first. We you know, replace it, what we're actually seeing, you know, so that we can draw it. Look how narrow these become. You know, of course, I know these houses aren't that narrow literally. It's the effect of going back in space. But, you know, what if you have things like this? Again, I might get a nice line through there, but I have to tell the truth, right? There might be particulars of architecture. It's not going to be like I could have a line here because these two are the same height. But then otherwise, they're totally not, you know, they're not rectangles. They're not boxy. They're not, you know, I mean, so it's not that convenient. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you are looking at a sculpture by Rachel Whitred where concrete has been cast in the space between the shelves of books in the library. It's kind of the ultimate negative space piece, isn't it? Three-dimensional, but the concrete has been poured. So all of these holes are where the books were on the shelves in the library. And the concrete was poured in there and then this was removed. So This was the air, like the space in between. Well, we could do a heck of a 1-point perspective drawing from this. Rachel, I know that I'm standing my eye level somewhere around here. That's becoming practically a straight line, and here the angles take off in the other direction from here where they're below. By the way, most of the time we go around, we don't look up that much. As a matter of fact, we don't even look eye level as much as we might guess. We kind of lazily, and our gaze usually drops down to a few feet below, in tabletops and all these kind of things, or at 30 some inches high or whatever. So you'd be amazed what we miss. And if you spend some time looking up at ceilings, it'll be much easier if you're outside looking at the tops of buildings. But if you just look up at and study the architecture of the ceiling meeting the wall, your eyes will get annoyed and fatigued. You'll feel like you're having to hold them in a weird position for a while. Whereas if you're glancing down at something that's below your eye level, you won't be that bothered because that's how you spend most of your day. There's a lot more space from my head to the ceiling than there is from my head to the floor. Another really, really common error is drawing it as if eye level is in the middle of that. I think video games have something to do with that. Video games made teaching this stuff a lot easier. Those first person, shooters, people just get ingrained what happens if I go left or if I go right or up and down. But they also brought in this notion that there's equal space here up and here down, which is preposterous. So if you're in the great city of Chicago, you might have, all this great stuff going on, but then you have particular awnings. And then you got the L to keep you busy. It's complicated out there, right? We would like for it to be nice and tidy. I would. I'd like a nice, cozy, 1-point perspective kind of place to be. But, there's stuff. There's, so we can figure out really rapidly that, okay, lines are converging, but we got pipes and we got ducts and we got, all kinds of stuff like that to deal with, right? But if it's horizontal and it's level, you're probably pretty comfy place with 1 point. The biggest issue being the things I said, wanting to make this more normal, like symmetrical and even and all that. But, other than hallways and certain streets you're going down, most of the time, life's not that simple, is it? Most of the time, architecture trying to establish itself as good wants to throw some curveballs, right? You might recognize this. You just might see, this might be a little familiar to you. This and this and this, they've all got different vanishing points. They've all got different things going on. It's crazy, right? So you got to be open to everything. But, after 1 point, comes ye old 2 point. Okay. Looks like I'm out of room, but you get the idea. This angle and this angle would eventually converge. But this and this, all these other things in my way. Darn architects trying to show off, you know. I don't know, somewhere, these are my dotted lines now, right? Somewhere down here, so this, when you can see two sides, of a building, and this is just a part, right? I got to do something different for this and that, and it's all got its own thing going on. These two angles are kind of the same. The straight line's below there somewhere, so my eye level's somewhere down here. I could probably use this guy to figure that out. Do I even need to? To draw this, though, I got to do some structural lines, right? Older building. Once again, do not try to draw these windows. When you're making one of these perspective drawings, do not try to draw these windows one at a time. Get a line established for the top, a line established for the bottom. Hell, get a line established for the centers, the panes or something. But do not try to do those one at a time. That's the number one thing where people go wrong. And if we stood a little bit more to the right, this side and this side might look symmetrical, and they may be the same. This stuff over here may be just like that, I don't know. But this side is tighter. This angle more dramatic than this one. Tell the truth on that kind of stuff. Use your negative space abilities, and simply you get the idea, right? Positive, negative shape, right? See this shape, see that one, see this one. Use that, okay? But probably the biggest teaching needed, in my estimation, that the draw through thing is what you're going to have to, if you're going to get appreciable results out of real architectural situations. There, I'm not saying you have to go and draw that, although you might be pleasantly surprised. You might find that it is better to tackle something like this. The windows will give you fits, but if you think you're going to play it safe and you're only going to do this, don't assume that. I have observed people actually do better drawings when they get outside and they can look at these buildings, and the buildings are really, campus buildings are really amazing and ornate and have all this stuff going on or whatever, but they're sitting far away from them outside, and they'll actually do a better job on that drawing than they did on the one when we were in the hallway the previous session. So go figure, yeah, I can see under this box. I can see on top of this box. This angle is running this way. These angles are running that way. I can't see either onto or under. On this box, no seeing onto, no seeing up under, because it straddles my eye level. This is a region that gives us fits. Something's way up high, we'll get these angles. Something's way down low, we'll get those angles. This, what the heck is that? We might get it backwards. The heck is that? Watch out for stuff that's close to your eye level. Good old 2-point perspective. This is a part of Manhattan in New York. There's probably a damn pottery barn right there now. What do you think? By the way, these cars were awesome. Notice the difference in just these two cars, how much I see of the side of this one and how tight that gets right there. So if I drew this building really well and then I messed up that, I might throw the whole sort of sense of convincingness about the space out the window, just by, or you would simply think that this car was like making some kind of crazy turn or something. It affects everything. So when you get into these kind of places, which is reality, not everything is rectangular or square. Not everything goes on for any length of distance. All kinds of stuff are in the space, and they're all turned different directions. Carts, every one of them's tilted a different way. There's junk, and like here, there's this, and there's that. I can see this tube, big HVAC tube, getting smaller as it goes back. These lights, but I would say don't be afraid of a situation like that. Just draw what you see. Now, don't reverse anything. You could use perspective theory to simply, like, if you're drawing this end of these cabinets the same or smaller than this end, then you're literally getting it backwards and you're just wrong. And perspective theory should teach you to not do things like that. If you're drawing your entire drawing with the same kinds of angles, so like something like this, it ends up looking like you're Godzilla and you rip the ceiling off and you're looking down at everything, then that's not right. Then we're not really in the space. There's stuff overhead. Matter of fact, here there's a lot more overhead than there is below. And that's normal because we stand about yay high and we usually have more space from our heads to the ceilings than from our heads to the floor. If you're somewhere like here and the street is going da 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 da, you just got to tell the truth. Maybe you get into one of these situations where, oh my gosh, my verticals aren't that vertical right here. It doesn't. You said I could rely on my verticals, Mullins, and now it's, now that's getting, messed up on me. Well, that happens, I have to report. And things are made, in all kinds of shapes and all kinds of, now, of course, we talked about foreshortening being the effects of perspective on the human body, but like, there's this thing where you can see it in instructional books. I'll show you how everything, like this could be based on a rectangle or a box or something like that. And I wouldn't discourage you from working that way, lightly, loosely, structurally. It'll have something like this, for things like cars, explaining how this end, that perspective's happening here. So this end is bigger than that end from where we stand, and stuff like this. Here you can actually see some of that kind of jazz, but for the most part, you've got some irregular shapes. 9 times out of 10, when you're looking at things, you have, for every time you're going to find something that I can do a nice, neat sort of draw over, like that inside of a plane or whatever, you're going to have, something that, or a nice round shape that we can make a nice ellipse out of. For every time you have something like that, you're gonna have something else that's like the design of it is a curve, or you have something where the back end is more tapered, or the front end, and then it really, makes you nuts, and you just gotta deal with it, right? So something like this, you can find a few anchors. You can find here and here, and of course here. Tops of these will be the same, so I could get one line going across that. Spacing of them, and then got to get a little less each time. How about something like this? I mean, that happens, right? That happens. You look out and you're like, now, I do not recommend that you try to draw every little window and this kind of stuff. I wouldn't try to do that. But you might play around with what uh, lines of the axes and structural lines and line weights and so forth, like how that can get handled, you know, because it can. That's the way to do it. You know, you can draw it something like this, where you make decisions about where to put in. Oh, these are little recessions. So I'm going to show some effects of light, and you know, but there's a line that you need to line up all of these. You know, this is a network of lines first, and then you put in the little fancy little whatever and the arches and stuff like that. But you know, there's 3.2. Shit, it only gets tougher. You know, there is you know, a position you can be in where you're so high up. You know, and this is not this building is not shaped weird. It does not have a bigger measurement at the top than it does down here. It's simply that it goes on long enough that from where you look, you can watch it get pinched as it gets farther away from you. That's what's happening here. It's easier. Now, if you go up in tall buildings a lot, you'll see this. You'll absolutely see this. But it's easier to come across this. You know, like you're down on the street and you look up, and if you're not that far away, the closer your nose is to the building, the more extreme this will look. But if you're in New York and you got crazy tall buildings and you know, you'll see this all the time. It probably, you know, this may be the exact same width as it is down here, you know, but this is what it looks like because it would all converge in the sky if it went on long enough. So let's do, you know, some perspective studies. The schedule, we don't have in-class assignment for this week, as I told you last time. Please catch up on anything else that's still outstanding or you owe me or you haven't done or whatever. But it does say for week 10, a minimum 2 perspective studies in sketchbook, right? So you're going to see a lot of stuff where there's a combination of architecture and stuff that just, you know, how do you draw fire? Well, you know, you draw it the same way, but don't look for flames to be giving you any of this kind of information, and don't look for smoke to be giving you any of this kind of information. It won't. Okay. But the truth is that most things in life will give you, the obvious one is trees, like natural. You're going to look at something if you're looking at pictures or you're looking outside, you're going to get, you know, things, really irregular natural elements. And then the perspective will be much more obvious on the things that we have made and constructed. Okay. But the way to handle it is to break out the, well, this would have been, this is done with ink pen, but, you know, to get out the, you know, the structural lines and the architectural handling, you know, the way we did long ago. And hopefully we never, you know, got rid of that. Let me take us over to, hang on just a second. Let's see what we see here. Yeah. So you got a sketchbook, right? And I'll just reiterate that kind of drawing, you know, Now, perspective is everywhere, okay? You probably have in your site right now some furniture, okay, that, is to draw the chair properly, you have to do perspective stuff to do that. Maybe you have bookshelves, you know, I don't know. But remember this stuff, right? Where we have light lines and well, try hard to begin a drawing. First to just hunt down. And this can be a reproduction or it can be in real space. I know it's cold outside now. You don't have to go outside if you don't want to. It's cold. It's cold. You will find no trouble if you just make an effort looking through pictures, on your computer or whatever. You'll find no trouble finding really good examples of one point. And if you look around, you can do some of what I did. You can simply, find some scenes take a look at a Stanley Kubrick movie. They're about one point. They're about perspective. If you've ever seen that movie, The Shining, it's about the color red. It's about other things too, but the 1 point perspective shots are sort of like just and go look for something else, some place that you find interesting or whatever, and look for a 2 point. And if you're feeling really saucy, maybe I can find some 3 point examples. Hey, I took a trip, me and my folks, and we went up in the sky deck and we, took all these shots looking down at the city. And darned if I don't have a whole bunch of 3-pointers, And so I'll work that out. This is a little harder and a little softer than you may want, but I want you to be able to see it here on my camera. And you start figuring out, some of these building tops, that the subtleties of the fact that the verticals are actually getting pinched in the 3-point, and it doesn't take very long. The way to draw it is like this. When we do these drawings on campus, or we're in a hallway, or we're outside, I don't creep along going real slow, trying to make everything perfect and expecting to get the angle right and then going back and erasing it. Don't do that. Work out, with anything being possible and everything. Figure out the major architectural elements of whatever it is you're looking at. And when those angles seem right, put them in with a heavier line weight, and then carry on from there. You can put a little bit of this jazz on, when you double up on lines and line weights, on windows or door openings or something like that, that's always nice looking. And just remember that axis that you kind of have with you. Don't go out looking for vanishing points in the world. Don't go out looking for the horizon to be visible necessarily, but just know that you always carry a kind of axes yourself that architectural elements will be reflecting. It's your position relative to things that will create angles. Well, perspective creates angles, recession in space creates angles, but what is your relationship to that, and work out I'm making stuff up here, but you get the idea, right? Work it all out, fill up the whole page. When you draw like this, it takes no time at all to fill up a sketchbook page. next week we'll do an 18 by 24 drawing where you can try to get past that thing where you start curving. You know, if you draw an angle that goes farther than a few inches, you start curving. Then we'll deal with that. But on a 8.5 by 11 or a 9 by 12 or something like that, you'll feel, you know, very comfortable and in control. And it'll go quite fast. You know, if you're simply just giving your attention to something like, oh, you know, this stairwell is really great. You know, I'm going to get a couple major lines to show how the stairway is pinched. And then I'm going to do a bunch of other light lines to try to get the sort of spacing of the spindles and the rail and that kind of. It doesn't take very long to work something like that up, or to figure it out, or to change it, or whatever, if you're working this way. Okay, so a couple of you know, architectural studies. Oh, there's a nice teddy bear. I came back over to the gallery view. There's a teddy bear. Now all I need is a capybara. I need to see a capybara. Well, I need to see more than that. I need to see all sorts of things, but little things that lift our mood are good. Maybe some architectural drawings to elevate our mood. Some, you know, light structural lines around our paper, general before the specific, keeping everything going together at once, right? Don't be, try to find something interesting for yourself. If you have, you know, a Millennium Falcon, then you might draw that rather than just draw the corner of your room, because that's, you know, if that's all you got is the corner of the room, okay, but I bet that's not all you got. If you go looking around on the internet, everything is there, right? So try to find something that is interesting for you, okay? And don't stray away from the complexity. You might be surprised if you're not in real space, meaning we're not actually in the stairwell in the CFA building or whatever. If you're looking at reproductions, or if you're looking at something on your screen, you'd be amazed how much more comfortable you are. Okay. All right. So some architectural drawings that feature architectural sketches that feature perspective. The juicier, the better. In our sketchbook. And then we'll have perspective part 2 on Monday when I see you next, okay? All right.
Lots of perspective sketchbooks, right?
Well, at least 2.
Okay, sure.
At least 2. Although I wouldn't think it would be too hard to do many more than 2. You know, if you're, you know, applying yourself and you're getting into it, I don't think it would be too hard if you're doing it right. But 2 minimum, okay? All right. Have great times between now and next Monday. Recoup.
Thank you.
Recover, rest, whatever you need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.